still remember the day my sister called me the disgrace of the family. She didn't yell, didn't scold me in front of others, but her soft voice cut through me like a cold blade. "Arya, you've shamed this family," Lila said, eyes unblinking, her smile as thin as a knife's edge. I stood frozen. No one defended me. Not a single glance of sympathy from my father, Graham Whitmore. A former federal judge, the man who always said the family's reputation mattered more than the law. A week later, I came home after a late shift at the campus library and found the locks had been changed. My mother, Ellen, had left a suitcase by the door. No letter, no message. Just a heavy, bone-deep silence. I collapsed on the steps, shaking. My mother looked at me through the window. She didn't open the door. She just stood there, clutching the rosary around her neck, eyes filled with something unfamiliar. "I'm your daughter," I murmured, but she turned away. It all started with a private video. One I didn't even know existed. Secretly recorded the summer I turned 20, back when I was dating Ethan. When I broke things off, he smiled and said, "Good luck keeping that sweet image." I didn't understand the warning until the clip hit the internet, passed around through anonymous messages. I wasn't just stripped of my body, I was stripped of my dignity, my name, and my future. I didn't share that video. I was the victim, but no one listened. No one stood by me. Lila didn't speak to me directly when she saw the video spreading. She sent the link straight to my father, along with one cold sentence. "You should act before the media does." Act. That night, Graham stormed into my room like a hurricane. He tossed my freshly earned college diploma onto the bed, voice searing. "You think we raised you so the world could see you like some. He didn't finish. He didn't have to." I was violated. I'm the victim. I tried to scream, but my throat closed up. "No," he snapped, icy. "You're the stain. As of now, you're no longer a Whitmore." My mother stood in the doorway, clutching her rosary. She didn't stop him. Didn't come near me. Didn't say a word. I turned to Lila, the same sister who studied with me every night in 8th grade, the one I gave my Christmas gift to just to see her smile. She looked at me without blinking, like I was nothing more than dirt on the family's red carpet. I packed in silence. Threw in a few clothes, my sketchbook, and an old journal. My parents didn't say goodbye. Lila didn't ask where I was going. I wandered the city with a little over $200 and a weight of shame pressing on my chest. The first night, I slept in a friend's car. By the 5th day, her sympathetic glances turned into silent cues. I understood. I left New Haven early one September morning. No goodbyes, no noise. I took the first interstate bus to Portland, far enough that no one would know my name. On the second night, when the bus stopped beneath an overpass, I stepped off quietly, sat by the curb, and pulled out an old notebook. The one with my mom's handwritten recipes. I tore each page slowly and fed them to a flame lit with a borrowed lighter. The fire was small, but bright enough to reflect my tears. I watched the ashes scatter into the night wind and whispered to myself, "If they erase me from that family, then I'll rewrite my name from whatever pieces are left." Portland in November was cold enough to bite through my collar. I found a tiny room in an old boarding house next to the train tracks. Room 12? Peeling walls, no hot water, and the nightly screech of freight trains like ghosts of the past howling by. I didn't complain, at least it had a door that locked from the inside. By day, I worked as a server at Clove and Ash, a bakery on the corner of Morrison. My uniform was a wrinkled brown apron and a smile I had to tape on. I memorized people's pastry preferences, even when they never remembered my name. In the afternoons, I cleaned a dental clinic in Little Vietnam. The kind of job where knowing how to say hello and hold a mop was all that mattered. The pay was low, but if you learned how to live quietly, it was enough. At night, I did data entry for a logistics company on an old laptop borrowed from the city library. The name on the contract: A. West. I had packed my past into 3 letters, just enough for the world to overlook. Sometimes I drew, not to hang or sell, but to survive. Pencil lines like whispers I hadn't dared say aloud. My life drifted on quietly, nothing remarkable, no new wounds, until one night at the clinic. I heard shouting. A woman was crying, holding a baby in her arms. In front of her stood an immigration officer, tall, with a cold voice, pointing repeatedly at a stack of documents. "She doesn't understand English," the nurse whispered. I stepped forward, my heart pounded, but my feet didn't stop. "Hold on," I said. "Are these documents even valid?" He turned and squinted. "Who are you?" "I'm someone who won't let this go the wrong way." I didn't know where the courage came from. I only remember the baby's eyes. Frightened, tearful, and a familiar pain pressing against my chest. I lied. I said the documents were expired. I said I worked for an immigration law organization. He backed off. Maybe he doubted me, maybe he didn't want trouble. But as he left, he looked at me one last time and said, "You just saved someone. Or maybe you just dug your own hole." I simply smiled. I'm used to being buried. A few days later, a man knocked on my door at the boarding house. He was black, with salt and pepper hair, wearing an old brown coat. "I'm Julian, director of Bridges of Hope. Someone told me what you did." I gripped the doorknob, thinking I was about to be arrested. But he smiled and said, "We need someone like you, not to mop floors." I started by making coffee, printing documents, then doing basic translation for undocumented immigrants. No one asked for my real name. No one needed to. I observed. I learned fast, took notes carefully. At night, I read immigration codes by the flicker of a shaky desk lamp. Gradually, I wrote grant proposals, drafted media plans, filed deportation delay requests for people I'd seen trembling in the hallway. 3 years passed. People began calling me Miss West from Bridges, a name no one could trace. I attended local policy meetings, just listening at first. Then slowly I was invited to speak. I never mentioned my past. No one asked why I avoided cameras, why I wasn't on social media, or why I always stood at the edge of group photos. One day, after a meeting about housing policy for undocumented families, a journalist approached me. "Have you ever worked in government? The way you break down issues? It's political." I just smiled. I've lived among people without a voice long enough to learn how to listen. That evening, I went back to my old apartment and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a necklace my mother once gave me, and an old photo of Lila and me, laughing side by side. I had erased my own face from that picture, but I hadn't erased the memory. I thought to myself, I'm no longer anyone's shadow. I'm my own light now. And I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But this time, I wasn't hiding anymore. I just needed to keep walking so the truth could become a safe place for those the world forgets. I never dreamed of becoming a politician. I only wanted the voices of the powerless to be heard. And if no one would listen, I'd rise up so they couldn't be ignored. One spring afternoon, while pouring coffee at an immigration policy forum, a man approached me. Striped shirt, loosened tie, and a direct gaze. "My name's Marlon Walsh," he said. "I used to run gubernatorial campaigns in Oregon for 3 terms, but I've never seen anyone talk about justice the way you do." I smiled politely, not overly enthusiastic. He tilted his head. "Have you ever considered running for office?" I remember, half joking, half serious. "I don't have the kind of face you plaster on campaign posters." 3 months later, I stood at a microphone in a small park in Salem, Oregon. No fancy sound system, no row of advisors, just me, an old wooden podium, and a simple message. I'm not here to represent a political party. I'm here to represent the people who were never invited to the table but carry it on their backs every single day. No one expected me to go far. I didn't have the Whitmore name behind me. I didn't have Lila to put me on CNN. I had no grand endorsement from my father. But I had a real story. I had resilience. And I had a forgotten community. Now they had a reason to believe. My campaign was called No Name, No Fear. We didn't use personal photos. No family PR. The posters had only one line: let the work speak first. And then, the unthinkable happened. In November, when the final results were announced, I, Aria West, became governor of Oregon at the age of 35. The media called me the quiet phenomenon, the woman from the shadows, the survivor who became a leader. I didn't deny it, but I didn't claim it either. I just knew one thing. My father's name never showed up in those stories, and somehow that gave me peace. Then one day the past knocked on my door. A headline flashed across my office screen. Lila Whitmore, U.S. Deputy Attorney General, under investigation for evidence tampering in a Honduran deportation case. I didn't flinch. Just silence. The cup of tea in my hand was still warm. Lila, the one who had sent that video to our father, the one who once looked at me like a stain at the family dinner table. Now she was facing possible criminal prosecution. I wasn't happy. I wasn't hurt. I just felt still, like a scar I hadn't noticed had already healed. 2 days later, the first hearing was held at the federal courthouse in D.C. I didn't notify anyone. I didn't bring the press. I took a red-eye flight, wore a gray wool coat, and pulled a beanie low over my ears. I entered the courtroom through a side door and took a seat in the last row, where the light couldn't reach. Lila sat at the defendant's table, posture straight, lips tight, just like I remembered. But her hands were shaking. For the first time, she looked undone. Across from her was Judge Meredith Sloan, the same woman who once shared a panel with me at a justice reform conference. Her eyes scanned the room, then stopped, one beat. Then she asked, her voice firm, tinged with surprise, "Is that Aria West? Is the governor of Oregon here today?" The room fell silent. Every head turned toward me. Cameras clicked non-stop. Staffers rushed out making calls. Lila spun around. Her eyes met mine, wide. Not cold, just stunned. And behind her was my mother, Ellen Whitmore. Hair grayer, thinner than I remembered. She clutched her chest, whispering something. Maybe a prayer, or maybe an unspoken question. Is that really my daughter? I didn't nod, didn't raise my hand, didn't say a word. I just sat there, back straight, silent. But that silence roared like thunder. Once cast out like garbage, now sitting at the highest place in the room? No revenge, no need to relive the past. My presence alone was the clearest answer of all. It took less than 24 hours after that hearing for the media firestorm to explode. A photo of me sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom, spotlight hitting my gray coat, spread across every national headline. Not because I spoke, but because I was there. And for my family, that appearance was heavier than any public accusation. The next morning, my office inbox was flooded. Messages, emails, interview requests. And then, something I never expected, the resurfaced video from all those years ago, the one that destroyed me at 20, dug back up. It appeared in a clickbait blog post with a screaming headline. Governor Aria West? Past exposed? Future in jeopardy? The video was grainy, but my face was unmistakable, and Ethan, the one who filmed it, appeared on a podcast, voice laced with smug ambiguity. We were young. She knew I had the clip, but I never thought she'd end up in the governor's seat. I watched the interview alone, in my dark office without turning on the lights. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. My press secretary knocked on the door, panicked. "We need to respond. We can sue. You need to make a statement right away." I shook my head. My voice was barely above a whisper. "There's no need. They've seen me before, and I survived." 3 days later, my father texted me. The first message in 15 years. "We need to talk." I didn't reply, but that night, a cousin called from Boston to tell me my mother, Ellen, had been hospitalized for high blood pressure. I hesitated. My heart wasn't soft, but something pulled me back. Maybe instinct. Maybe the part of me I had never fully silenced. I flew back to Providence, the city I had left without looking back. The old house was still there. Stone walls, wooden porch, maple trees in the yard now taller than I remembered, but everything felt smaller. The door opened. My father, Graham, stood in a white shirt and gray tie, rigid as ever. But his hair was gray now, and the coldness in his eyes had faded. My mother lay on the sofa, pale. Lila sat at the end of the table, twisting a napkin in her hands. Dinner had been prepared. Porcelain plates, scented candles, pot roast made the way I used to like it, even though no one had asked me what I liked in the past 2 decades. I sat down. Said nothing. Asked nothing. Just observed. My father spoke first, as if he still believed he commanded the room. "Arya, we know a lot of time has passed, but now is the time to heal. We're family, no matter what's happened." I looked at him and offered a faint smile. "The last time you said that was when you threw my suitcase out the door." No one responded. Lila took a deep breath, her voice trembling. I never thought it would go that far. I didn't think the video would spread. I just wanted Dad to step in. For the family's reputation. I set my fork and knife down. The soft clink rang like a crack in the air. "How interesting," I said slowly, "because every time you all thought about reputation, I was thinking about survival." My mother reached for my hand. Her skin was cold, wrinkled, her eyes glistened. "You're the strongest one in this house," she whispered. "If there's anything you can do now, I just hope you'll help your sister. One word, just one word to the prosecutor." I turned to Lila. She once threw me into a pit, and now she was pleading from the bottom of it. I asked, staring directly at her. "If I weren't governor, if I had no power, no voice, no name, would I still be family in your eyes?" No one answered. The silence stretched, long and heavy, like the night I walked out of this house in tears. I stood. My chair slid back with a soft scrape that sounded like a closing gavel. "I kept the name Whitmore," I said, "but I've lived my whole life without needing it." I walked to the door, didn't look back. My mother called my name, her voice cracking. My father stayed silent. Lila lowered her head. Outside, the night wind was bitter cold. But I felt lighter. Like, for the first time in 15 years, I was walking without carrying their weight on my back. I returned to Oregon in silence. No press release, no exclusive interviews. I simply went back to my office, opened my laptop, and began typing the first lines of a new draft. The Justice Witness Protection Bill. I used to think laws were fences built to keep out what's wrong. But my own wounds pointed to a gray zone no one had touched. When family, not politics, becomes the quietest form of coercion. Not everyone is silenced by bullets. Some are silenced by a father's whisper, a mother's glance, a sister's betrayal. And when those whispers come from people with influence or public respect, the damage cuts deeper and becomes harder to name. It decided to name the draft bill the Justice Shield Act, a law prohibiting any form of coercion, threats, or damage to the credibility of witnesses, officials, or activists through blood ties, marriage, or personal relationships. When I introduced the bill, public opinion split in two. One half saw me as a whistleblower, taking a stand against the deep-rooted silence of family culture. The other half called me ungrateful, someone attacking her own family for political gain. I didn't respond. I let the bill speak for itself. And then, the unexpected happened. More than 30 states sent speaking invitations. Human rights organizations, survivor support groups, even civil servants who had suffered in silence due to family ties. They all began sharing their stories. Not long after, the media started calling me the one who named a pain no one had ever dared name. A major newspaper ran the headline, Aria West, from invisible victim to legislature of personal transparency. I didn't feel proud, I just felt it had to be done. That June, I took the stage at the National Family Justice Reform Conference, held in Chicago. The auditorium was quiet. The audience included former officials, trial witnesses, even judges who had resigned rather than cover for their relatives. Under the spotlight, I saw a small sign backstage written in chalk. "You are not betraying your family when you choose to speak the truth." I walked out. No speech notes, no projector screen. Just me, and a truth I'd never spoken aloud. I was once kicked out of my home because I no longer fit the image my family expected. I was once called a stain simply for being the victim of a private violation. I was once pressured into silence because telling the truth would tarnish someone else's name. And now, I stand here, not to seek justice for myself, but to name a fear many of us have lived with, the fear that telling the truth means losing your family. Some heads bowed, a few quiet sobs echoed in the room. I paused, then pulled a folded page from my pocket, not a copy of the bill, but a new proposal. I called it the Public Kinship Clause. Its content was simple. Any public official should have the right to declare a family relationship that might create a conflict of interest, without fear of judgment, punishment, or being branded a traitor. A system that allows honesty without punishment for blood ties. When I finished my speech, there was no thunderous applause. But in the audience, an older woman with silver hair slowly placed her hand over her heart and nodded, tears in her eyes. A young man beside her gave her shoulder a gentle pat. And I knew, in that moment, I wasn't speaking alone anymore. 3 days later, the Public Kinship Clause was officially submitted to the state Senate. 6 other states announced they would explore implementing similar models. I didn't go on TV. I didn't post a celebration. That night, I went home, poured myself a cup of tea, and looked at the painting I made during my first days in Portland. A woman standing alone in a desert, her shadow twice her size. I wrote a new title in black ink on the frame. No longer the shadow. The office door clicked shut after a meeting on community housing policy. My assistant stepped in quietly. "Governor West, there's someone waiting downstairs." She didn't make an appointment, but said her name is Lila Whitmore. I looked up, my pen pausing mid-page. That name, no longer painful but never fully healed. "Send her up," I said. A few minutes later, the door opened. Lila stepped in. No heavy makeup, no sharp business dress, no air of someone who once sat with the Department of Justice. Just a tired woman, holding a faded canvas tote. I didn't stand. She sat across from me. The distance between us shorter than when we were sisters, but farther than any family dinner had ever been. "I don't know where to start," she said, her voice no longer sharp as a blade. "But maybe start by admitting I was jealous. I tried to lift myself up by pushing you down." Said nothing, I just listened. I thought I was the one carrying the family's reputation, the one our parents were proud of, but I forgot you were the one who stood tall when there was nothing left holding you up. She pulled out a letter from her bag, wrinkled, unsigned. "I once wrote this," she said. "A letter asking you to help me during the trial, but I never sent it. I knew you had already done the stronger thing, staying silent." I looked at the letter but didn't reach for it. I simply nodded. Lila stood, her eyes red. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just hope you no longer have to carry me like a scar." As the door closed behind her, I looked down at my hands. Empty. Not angry, not forgiving, just understanding. Some things don't need to be returned because they were never truly yours. The following week, I gave a speech at UC Berkeley at a conference titled Policy and Personal Legacy: When Truth Surpasses Blood. The hall was packed. Under the stage lights, I spotted a man standing at the very back. No one paid him any mind. An older man, gray-haired, worn coat, hands clasped in front of him. My father, Graham Whitmore. I still remembered those eyes. Once cold as steel, once unable to look at me the day I was cast out. Now they were just the eyes of a man who had missed too many years, too many chances, to call me his daughter. When I finished speaking, the applause came, not overwhelming, just enough. He stood quietly, not moving forward, but as the crowd began to disperse, he slowly stepped toward the stage. He didn't ask for a mic. He didn't request to speak. He just said, loud enough for me and the front row to hear. I never understood my daughter, but today I realize maybe I don't need to. I just need to acknowledge you did something I never had the courage to do. I looked at him, no smile, no nod, but my heart softened, like soil after the rain. He turned and walked away. I didn't call out to him. That acceptance, small late, was enough to close a long chapter. That night I returned to my small apartment in the Pearl District, the place I'd kept as my own retreat, separate from the governor's office. No staff, no press, no one knew it but me and those I trust. I brewed tea and sat before my old easel. On it was an unfinished painting, a girl standing on a cliff, looking out over a city, her shadow long but no longer consuming her. Entitled the painting, She Who Does Not Need to Be Seen to Exist. I know now that I don't need an apology to heal. I don't need a spotlight to prove my worth. I don't need a belated embrace to be a decent person. And rewritten my legacy, not by clinging to them, not by fighting against them, but simply by no longer needing them to know who I am. Arya's story isn't just one of overcoming family pain, it's a powerful reminder. We don't need recognition to have value. In a world where bloodlines can sometimes feel like chains, Arya chose to redefine honor, courage, and justice on her own terms. She didn't need forgiveness to move forward, nor approval to exist. Healing doesn't always come from repair. Sometimes it comes from knowing who you are and no longer being afraid when others find out. What do you think about Arya's journey? Have you ever gone through something similar? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, meaningful stories about life and family.